Hello, all. Am I alone? Am I in a cave?
I'm here, Marty.
I'm
There
here,
you
Marty.
go. Oh, my peeps. You're back. I can see you. Oh, look at there is Chairperson Barnes. Thank you. It looks like the light's on at Issa's house, but I don't know if anybody's home. You know what I'm saying? I tried to encourage a response. How is everybody doing while we give people a chance to sign on here?
Not too bad.
Good. We're doing well down here in Springville. Great
Excellent.
winter weather down here.
Oh boy,
Great for
it's really.
skiing and snowmobiling. It's just great.
Mhm.
How's everybody doing? I'm doing great, thanks. A lot of snow out here, though.
Yeah, it's definitely a bit chilly out there.
Yeah,
Nothing we can't handle.
totally different than the background that I had last time we met.
I know you don't have your bikini on. You need a snow shovel.
Nope.
I'll
uh,
exercise. That's okay.
yeah,
This stuff that came down this time was so light that I was thinking about shoveling and not snow blowing. But
yeah, yeah.
we'll see. We'll see. So, uh, in regard to this evening, I just want to give Andrew a chance to escape later. There, I just want to let everybody know that there is another commitment with this police reform at the statewide that Andrew will be participating in. So we'll have Monica to step up and take charge, and I guess we should probably get going so that Andrew can hear as much as possible. So we've shared lots of things, but time is of the essence. Some of those things that were shared were the citizen survey. So because I've just been trying to get everybody as much information as possible whenever it comes in to me or Andrew, um, I've been sending it out piecemeal. And last night, because I wasn't sure if making you an administrator on the citizen survey would give you access to the responses, I then stayed up late and ran everything in SPSS and then made pretty pie charts and put most of it in a Word document and emailed that to you. So those pie charts should be the same. Was everybody able to gain access to the responses to the citizen survey?
That last document you sent, I believe, with the pie charts is the one I looked at, Marty. The share drive, the Google thing, I didn't really got access to at all, but it's the same information, just that you transported into pie charts, correct?
Yeah, well, they had pie charts too, but yeah, it is the same information. I just couldn't include all of the written responses because I put one in there for you to see, maybe two, and each question made 20 pages of comments. We have roughly, I think, 363 responses, which was good. Although we had those right out of the gate, probably within the first few days of our last meeting, we had this many. I don't know if anybody's filled it out since. Um, but I can tell you that as far as surveys go, it worked well in that we got 363 people to fill it out, and I think they all took it very seriously. We received, as those pie charts suggest, kind of diverging answers on lots of the questions. So I think that speaks to them taking the survey seriously and responding how they feel. And then when you read the open-ended responses, we got some real good information and material on the issues that we want to look at. But if you can't access, could anybody else try? Did anybody else try to access the Google Docs, Google Forms shared link that I sent?
Yes, I
Feature?
did. I was able to see the responses to the survey.
Oh, sweet. Okay, so it's possible. I knew Andrew got it. Um, so and Etha could get it. I think we're going to have to. It would be really helpful if everybody could figure out how to access that document because it gives everybody the open-ended responses in an easier to read format. Um, they're all just listed under each question, one after another,
Yeah.
and so it's easier to get through. But Isa, would you say they gave us a lot of good information? Yes. On mic, Isa, turn your microphone on.
I say yes. I mean, I was actually surprised that we were able to collect that much data in such a short time frame.
I agree. It was very good, and I'll even be able to do some extra analysis that we wouldn't get from that Google Forms does automatically for you, those pie charts, for example. So we'll
Uh-huh.
be able to see if people of different ages or genders or race had different systematic responses to things that might give us a little deeper dive and a little more insight into understanding and appreciating their responses.
Yeah.
So I can do that. I'm pleased to tell everybody this is hot off the press that 5 minutes ago I just looked and we already have 22 deputies who've completed the deputy officer survey. And 3 minutes after that, somebody else already, so we're up to a whopping 23. Uh, so that makes me really happy too. And they gave, you know, they gave good insight and good answers. For example, the first questions were how important is it to be honest and open with citizens, and they all said like 10 out of 10 or 9 out of 10. They thought it was really important to be honest in your interactions because once you lose that cooperation, it can be really hard to get back, and nobody likes to be lied to, and in any part of your life. So, they acknowledge those kinds of things. Interesting, a couple said things like, well, maybe not always. If you're dealing with a suspect, you might not want to be completely open and honest at all times. But for the most part, as a general rule, they felt it was extremely important. Um, Most of them that responded said that they thought that they had the tools and resources needed to do their job. So that was good. A couple said no, and a couple said, like technology issues and things like that. So they gave specific suggestions. And so I'll make that available to everybody as well. And I think that I Andrew gave us, I don't know if anybody else got a chance to look at the one Excel spreadsheet that has other towns and jurisdictions that provided the reports already. But going over some of the other jurisdictions, I think will be very helpful in a couple of ways. A, to see what they physically look like and how they're organized and things like that. But also, uh, they often provide blow by blow recommendations, section by section. It seems like we're all, generally speaking, looking at the same four major areas. So everybody's working off of the guidebook from the governor's office. That's good. Um, I spoke with Andrew today, and I think at the end of the day, we, at least in the two or three that I've seen so far, we're doing way more stuff. Not that we're doing more stuff. They recommended that they collect data, for example, but we're actually going to have some to be putting into this document, and not some. Like Issa said, we quickly got over 360 responses from citizens, and it looks like just in a couple of days we're getting dozens of deputies to fill out the survey. And then we have all the calls for service. I wanted to make sure that you also received the one Microsoft Excel document, 2000 calls for service 2015 to 2019. That was a neat one that had some line graphs that were, I think, particularly enlightening for people when calls come in. I mean, some of it is just a little nerding out, quite frankly, to look at what hour of each day the calls come in, what day of each week, what month of each year, and watch those trends. But a lot of the other stuff is really valuable. And as I put in my one comment, I think a general takeaway is that we've seen an increase in calls for police services over the years. Um, when at the same time we've had a reduction in crime in our region, but we also had a reduction in the number of calls for the more serious calls for police services. And that only works out mathematically one way, that if we had increased calls for services and the number of serious calls went down, that has to be because the number of less serious ones went up at the same time. So that's a general trend that we saw. Um, and as I also mentioned, 95,000 calls about a year. And as a general note, those were final disposition calls. So just as so you understand that data a little better, somebody might call in and say, it gets described as a, can I be silly? It could be described as the old cat in the tree, but then it turns out when the officer um, gets to the call, it was a woman named Kitty, and she was chased up a tree, and it's an assault case. So the officer might change that call to an assault call. So what it starts at and what it finishes at the very early instance is what we're looking at. Okay, these were adjusted calls for service. Typically, they are what they start as, but sometimes an officer might go in and say, this is what this call really is. And then it would get changed. And that's the variable that we used for our calls for services. Okay. And each time and I'll give you, just give me one more second here. Each time we get a little closer to probably the truth. And I'm just going to start priming the pump now. What we have to accomplish is great in the next little while. But what we're trying to do with all of this data and information that we very quickly and logically collected, there are realities, and we're trying to measure those realities. There are so many crimes, for example, that occurred in Erie County in any one of those years. And we are using, for example, one measure, calls for police services, as a way to measure and guess what that true number is. Now, nobody believes that the number of police calls for services is an exact representation of reality. That's not exactly how many crimes there are, or even how many times people need service. But that's what we're using to make our best judgment. And so I just want everybody, as we move forward, to write up our findings, to pay attention to that all of these things are measures that we're trying to make guesses about a reality that we don't have 100% understanding of. Okay? And so that makes how we interpret these things, I think we need to take a little care with. Anyways, Bill, I was
Yeah.
rude and interrupted you.
No. In regards to that report with all the data and all the calls, is there information in there on the SWAT activities, no-knock warrants, and use of force? Those were three things that were requested from Daniel, and his response was data provided by the chair. And
Correct.
and
I have that. If you didn't get it, I'll get it to you tonight.
okay,
We have stuff on all of that.
all right.
I've been shipping stuff to Andrew as trying to have a central hub of information. And if you don't have it, then I didn't do that. So we have the number of no-knock warrants and all of the outcomes associated with those.
I know we
And
discussed it at a previous meeting. I just didn't take the notes. So,
yeah,
and that falls in subcommittee 2. That was the.
I will
So,
definitely get that to you. And as we talked about in the last meeting, there were a lot from memory, like 100 and 287 or something. And the outcomes were very positive for the police department, for the sheriff's office. There weren't, one person was tased, 3 dogs were shot, and we also know that for the whole office, there's only about 5 to 8 complaints in any given year, and that includes those narcotics officers that conducted those no-knock warrants. So they don't get complaints. They don't generate complaints, and they're not hurting people.
yeah, I remember the conclusion, but I didn't see the data. So,
I will get that
Okay,
to you. I
thanks.
apologize.
Marty, it's Kevin. Just a couple
Yeah, Kevin.
observations. I had a time to, take a better look at the calls for service and, drill it down a little bit. And I know we discussed this previously, so I don't want to belabor the point too much. But I mean, you're looking at 87,000 and 95,000 calls for service for that 4-year clip that we looked at. And what really stands out, I know we discussed, is that the city of Buffalo leads jurisdictions at almost like 14 or 15% of all calls for service. And I know Dan talked about the fact that it's county buildings maybe driving those numbers, but those county buildings are staffed by deputies that aren't road patrol. The ones that handle the RAF building and everything else, I'm pretty sure they're not road patrol deputies. They might be attached to the court and things of that nature, but I don't know if it's worth pursuing or drilling that down any further. But a big chunk of calls for service are attributed to the city of Buffalo, which maybe is a good thing or bad thing, as we point that out. But consistently over that 4-year trend, we look at 14 to 15% all calls for service associated with the city of Buffalo. Now, if there are things as transporting prisoners to and from those courts where they do take what they call the CL numbers, those numbers might be inaccurate if we are trying to be accurate in terms of what's going on in the city of Buffalo. The other things I noticed too was the fact that community policing numbers. Any given year, about 2 to 3% of the calls for service are associated with community policing, which I think is pretty low. In this day and age that we're talking about community policing being more something that police should be doing, maybe that's a recommendation we should consider, is that increase allocation of time for community policing services, because 2 to 3% is pretty low as you look at regarding all the calls for service. Now, one thing that stood out too, which I think is noteworthy, is that EMS and medical calls, 6.2%, 7% on an annual basis, that the road patrol deputies are responding to EMS calls and probably saving lives, which is some recognition maybe we should throw together at some point too in our write-up, saying that the deputies out there are saving lives. And no big surprise here. I think we understand that type 1, type 2 crimes, you only look at about 5 or 6% of their time or their calls for service are dedicated to criminal enforcement. A huge chunk of the road patrol time is for calls for police service. They're like miscellaneous in nature. So a very small percentage of time on the road are the deputies actually enforcing the law, so to speak. I think we understand that, but I don't think the public would really understand that or have an idea that's going on. So just a couple observations, what I noticed, that's all.
Yeah, so if I could just say, comment on a couple of things. I do think that um, one of the things we can be very helpful, I think, is to make a recommendation that doesn't end with our work on April 1. You know, we could have recommendations that the county needs to follow up on things. And I think that, and one of them could certainly be to dig deeper and see about this involvement with services in the city of Buffalo. That could be a great follow-up piece of work that they could be asked to look into. Um, I
Mark,
think that, yeah, Isa.
in reference to Kevin's comment, I believe that the premise under which we started was that we were looking at not just the road patrol, but that we were looking at the policing service division of the sheriff department. Am I correct, or am I missing something here?
Um, in the survey and elsewhere, I've mentioned the criminal division slash road patrol to include both. So I think you're correct. I think what we originally agreed to were those representatives of the sheriff's office that conduct policing activities that are engaging the community.
Yeah,
And
yeah. And also one of the things that we need to be very careful with the data that we have in regards to type 1 crime, type 2, and so on and so forth is we got to be careful, because a lot of that data, for example, let's say Clarence and Grand Island, you see, type 1 crime and type 2 crime are pretty much very high as reported by the sheriff department, but that is because they are the only policing force in those areas. But then if you look at other places like Buffalo, the number there is very low because they have a police department. So we got to be careful when we look at those particular data, because that data the Buffalo Police Department, I mean the sheriff department, is only a subcomponent of the policing services that exist in the city of Buffalo versus what they do in Grand Island, they are pretty much the only game in town there.
yeah, so that goes back to my general comment that we have to be careful in how we handle this data. I make my graduate students listen to a presentation by one of them on the old book, you know, How to Lie with Statistics, and at the end of the my comment is that, you know, statistics don't lie, but people who want to mislead other people can be effective at using statistics. And if you understand statistics, at least some amount of it, it doesn't trick you. You know, you can't be tricked as easily. So that's why I encourage my graduate students to learn as much as they can, so they're not fooled. But it your comment more specifically, Isa, speaks to the complicated nature of making general statements about our data, and that we have to think about some of these particular issues. And Mayor Krebs has already brought one up. You know, maybe the fact that those places, those jurisdictions where there are deputy sheriffs that go there physically every day, you will, and assuming that those deputies are working, deputies produce things, and they're systematically going to come out of wherever those deputy officers are. And if we put them in areas, then you would just naturally expect those areas to have more documentation. So I absolutely, that's exactly what I'm talking about when I say that the stuff can we have to think about what it means
Yeah.
and what's appropriate to say. And that's where I hope this goes, that we can use it in a way um, that provides good ideas and suggestions and recommendations.
Hey, Marty, can I make a couple quick points? John Greenan.
Please.
Just to address a couple issues that were raised there. First of all, the deputies that are in the Rath building and the other county buildings are in fact police officers and part of our road patrol criminal division. So, just to clear up that misconception.
Okay.
And just to touch base on one of Isa's issues, was that like Clarence, for instance, we are not the only law enforcement there, and in fact, at any time, the state police probably have as many or more, most likely more from the latest data that I saw, have more officers assigned to the town of Clarence than the Erie County Sheriff does at any one point. And the same goes, same is true for Grand Island. I know those were two that there was some question on. So I just want to point those issues out. And I think, again, going back to your issue of what the statistics actually say, the fact that they're only level 1 or level 2 crimes, and what percentage that is of our time spent on those issues. Quite often those are issues where our road patrol division has an initial complaint log is made, and that may be one instance, but we may assign a detective to that particular case. In many cases, particularly the level 1 crimes, and they may spend weeks and weeks on that particular crime. The statistics don't really show how much time is spent by our deputies dealing with it, because there's all the follow-up that has to occur, and and that often takes days or months depending on what the crime is. So again, the statistics may say one thing, but the context of it, I think, is kind of important.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks.
And speaking to that, one of your comments, Kevin, was the small number, 2 to 3%, associated with community policing. I would say that is simply that's an issue of how they counted it. That's just those officers that classified their activity that way. And I agree much more with Mayor Krebs. And if you look at all of those other activities, I think there's very strong arguments that most of everything in that calls for police services represents some form of community policing.
Yeah, I would agree, Mark.
Now, but they're not good.
I think
They're not going to be classified like that.
I think a lot of police officers don't create credit for community police functions. Like you said, those statistics are probably artificially low. There's no doubt about it. But John, I just ask you a quick question. I mean, can you approximate? I mean, in terms of, is there correctional staff from the sheriffs that are taking CLs for activities in the city of Buffalo? I don't know if you would even have a venture a guess.
I could take a look, but I do know we do take CLs for, say we're transporting someone from the holding center to the correctional facility. The CL is generated for that. How that is accounted for in the data you're looking at right now, I would have to take a look. But CL is generated for a transport.
Right. Okay.
But we should be able to weed that out, because it should be a specific transport CL.
Yeah.
Hey,
Kevin, it's Dan. I'm on now. Those transport calls were not included in the data. I think I spoke to you about that the last time.
So you carved out all correctional stuff out of those numbers?
Yes.
Dan? Okay.
Yeah.
Outstanding.
Those were all, what you're seeing though, Kevin, is all of the calls to the county buildings downtown. That's why it seems like, holy cow, that's a lot of calls. Well, that's because there is a lot of calls.
Right.
Real quick on that issue, interestingly enough, as I've looked at the data over time, it's actually humorous that on many days we have a lot more arrests strictly coming out of the Rath building than we do the rest of the county. And a lot of that is for, the criminals seem to come to us down at the Rath building, and they park outside illegally, and their tags get run. You find their stolen cars, and or they come in and cause large disturbances in our social services buildings, and that in fact generates quite a bit of activity.
Under Sheriff Green, and I think it also generates, if we look at our citizen survey and some of the feedback, that's exactly where some of the disparate treatment of underserved populations complaints about are being generated. Just in, and it's not policing stuff, it's how they're communicated with, how they're looked at, how they're whatever. We'll get through that with the comments, and I think if that's it's not a heavy lift to find some solution to make people understand that they're representing you when they stand there, and they need to be as professional as possible. Anyways, all good stuff. And does anybody else have any comments? I'm going to be sharing even, like I said, more information, but I think what we need to think about today, I'm super happy that we're talking about some of this stuff, but I think we need to, what I would like to accomplish today is to get a game plan on how we're going to get this draft done in time. And quite frankly, Andrew came during the week, as you know, and asked for a deadline, I think of, I don't know, 16th or something like that. And I had a slight aneurysm. And
Deadline the 19th.
yeah, the 19th. And only like a strong attorney and good judge, Judge Murphy, argued our case for us and got us an extension up to the 22nd. So bless her soul. And she also wrote me outlining the really large number of hours that she is willing to donate towards working on this draft. It was really impressive, the amount of hours that she is planning on 20-hour increments that she's willing to put out over a couple of days. So my thanks to her. So on this topic of organizing, I think we have a couple of things. One, again, we can keep talking about some of the things that are interesting to you now relative to that survey, because it may help in this next step, which is, should we have our subcommittees break out maybe and have a meeting in the next day or two? I don't know, and have us reconvene maybe on Friday so that we could work then over the weekend to write. Do you want to just have one meeting? I think those two options seem to me to make the most sense. Either we meet as subgroups once very quickly and try to put our bullet points together. My hope is that we could get Missy's and Bill have done great jobs of already starting to organize their section and soliciting for input. And maybe we could just get a whole set of bullets under each subcommittee and then maybe try to organize those bullets and then hand it over to a group that might, try to put one pen on all of this and get a draft together. And then we could have, what time we have left to bring that report back to the whole committee, and then have people start picking at the bones, wordsmithing any or raising any concerns or what have you. Your thoughts?
So, Marty, I'm not the wordsmither, so whoever, if that's even a word. So,
It is.
but
Good job.
I don't mind organizing, as I tried to do a little bit today. I mean, I honestly think that through all of the meetings that we have, in my opinion, plus the information that we've been getting from Dan and from you and from whomever else, I think, at least for our group, that we can start to put together, just by following those subsections of your own subsection, similar to what I sent you today, some of our thoughts and ideas, then meet in our groups and make sure that what's coming out of our group is what we want to be presented in the draft. and then maybe have Margaret take all of those sections, or Margaret and a group of people take all of those sections and kind of make it a little bit more cohesive, or look like each other. I mean, I would like to meet with my subcommittee within the next couple of days as well, and get an idea of what each member can contribute, and then be able to present something to you next week. And I think I believe Bill said that his group has been doing pretty much similar, or has at least started some organization. And if we can get a draft of a draft out, by the subcommittees to the group by next week, that probably would be very helpful to Margaret and her efforts.
Yes, I agree.
And there might be some areas where, like, I left some blank, and even like I'm missing some demographics, although you provided some of that today. And probably I would love to see my subcommittee add to the recommendation piece or change it up a little bit. And but there might even be some full blanks that we can't answer. But I just received a draft for my Eden Police Department. It's much more simplified than probably anything we're going to turn in, just because of the size. And we actually got 0 community input with lots of effort. So that was kind of disappointing. But so based off of that, and I looked at some of the examples. I mean, it can be elaborate, it can be simple. I'm hoping we'll be at least somewhere in the middle, or towards more detailed side of things for our group, for this particular group. But I don't think we need to overthink it either. That's just my opinion.
Excellent.
I think we have at least in and thank you, Bill and Missy, for everything you guys have done. I mean, you guys are really sparkers. But I think we have more than enough information to come up with a very, very rough draft with very concise recommendations based on the information that we have. The only one thing that I'm going to request is that I'm on committee number 2 and number 4, that we kind of coordinate, that we don't have the subcommittee meetings at the same time.
That would be good.
Yeah, Marty, I have one last question in regards to the community survey. I'm assuming this is bad, but I'm assuming that there is still data coming in from the community survey. Is that data going to be available on the same link that you sent, or will there be a different link?
It should be accessible as we go, because if I made you an editor, you should have the same status as me. And
Okay.
when they come in, they come in. And I am just, again, we're all members of this elite task force, and I request/demand that as the editor, you don't edit anything on those surveys. Those are people's responses, and we can't change anything. So that's just my request. But yes, to answer your question, it should be updated instantaneously.
Marty,
Yes.
the subcommittee 2 report that I've been pulling together for our committee, it lists. Actually, I put in some of the topic issues from the public meetings that we had in October, because that really started us out. So I'm
Yep.
trying to pull in all this information under subcommittee 2, and when we get down to the recommendations, it should flow like, this is how we got to thinking about these issues. And then it has the Erie County Sheriff Office questions and answers, the call data, the resident survey that we just got. I'm trying to pull in under each one of those sections what I thought was important information, and now the deputy survey that you're going to provide us. So we need that. But our subcommittee, and I think the members that are on the call now would agree, we need to look at all of that. And I've sort of suggested some, and there have been a couple of recommendations that we made based on our hunches a long time ago. But when you look at all that data and all our discussion, we have to come up with some recommendations, and there should be from the subcommittee a consensus that those are what we want to recommend, and there even should be a good consensus of how they're worded. And then that report, which is growing day by day as I add stuff to it, as you provide the information, that that'll go to you, and it could be attached like as an appendix or something, because that'll be the outline of all the thinking we did, all the research, all the thinking, all the analysis that we did on this particular topic. But we need to meet, and we should, we need to have some honest conversation. We have had some by email. Esau just sent some excellent recommendations on community policing that will, I think, be part of this draft. So, that's the kind of thing. Or if the committee members subcommittee members are too busy, we could do it by email, but we have to meet somehow and flesh that out.
And maybe we put your comments and Missy's together, and the subcommittees work together on building their subsections over the next several days over the weekend, and put together your draft for, let's say, maybe next Wednesday. I don't know if we had everything, but I think now what Bill said is important too. One of the things I worried about is I didn't want this all to come back to me and have it be Marty's perspective on what other people said. I want everybody to be able to share and have ownership, especially in their subcommittees, that what they feel and what they see is being expressed. So that's really important, that everybody on this call and everybody on the task force, we've had some people put in a little more time than others. That's fine. I'm deeply appreciative, but moving forward is when I need everybody to put their 2 cents in, so that they can say, when we put this report together, that my voice was heard in this document. I want every single member to take that seriously and to work to whatever time they have to be able to do that. And if you can't make a meeting, then respond in email. Read the stuff that is coming your way, and that just leads me to one last cautionary tale. It's been a theme throughout my comments. How you write up your bullets is important. I want us to remember that we're talking about the Erie County Sheriff's Office. When I read through lots of the comments, I think that many of them, while important, and we have to acknowledge how many we get and what they're about, but many of them I think are just general about police and not about the Erie County Sheriff's Office. And we kind of have to think about that as we write up our reports. I wouldn't want to, for example, there have been some comments that are extremely positive about law enforcement. Great. They're the best. Don't do anything different. Well, are you talking about the Erie County Sheriff's Office? You talking about all police officers? What are we talking about here? We have comments on the other side of the spectrum where they say things like, everybody I see pulled over is black and something has to be done. Now, are they talking about all police interactions? Everybody are they talking about sheriff's deputies pulling people over? I think there's lots of times where we're getting lots of responses that we have to consider when we attribute things to the sheriff's office. I wouldn't want to misrepresent in any direction. So I think we all have to, be thinking about this as we read through all of the responses. And then again, how we write it up. Let me give you a quick example. I had a graduate student writing things up on a department that we studied the implementation of body-worn cameras. And the officers gave really good responses. And most of them, 85, 90% of the responses were quite frankly very positive about the fact that they had been wearing body-worn cameras for 6 months. And there were two questions that they responded negatively about, and they said like it was hard to use or some whatever it was, not important. But the student wrote up when they wrote up their findings focused almost entirely on those two questions that spoke against the police and their efforts at using body-worn cameras, when the overall flavor, the totality of the survey responses didn't describe that. And so, what I'm asking again is to put things into context. So maybe you say something like, while 60% of the responses were associated with this, there was these numbers of responses that were critical or hyper positive, whatever the case may be. I'm just asking, as when you make your bullets, that we think about everything in your section, and there are going to be recommendations, there's going to be the identification of problems, there's going to be the identification of positive things, and I want us to be able to present those bullets in an honest way that makes an honest reflection of all of the information that we've received. And that's a big, hard task for all of us because we have a ton of information. And I'm really proud of all of you because we have way more than everybody else. We're later in the day at getting stuff turned in, but it's because we've done more due diligence to get our answers. And we're going to have more specific things to talk about. Okay, I'll get off my pedestal. Yep.
It's Holly. Can I just make a quick comment?
Please.
I think what you said is really serious, and I really don't want to see any data muddled, if that's even a word. But I think for the uniformity of the overall document, since we're going to be in 4 separate groups, you got maybe little 4 separate styles of writing, and hopefully Margaret helps us all out in the end with that uniformity. But I think it would help if you would come up with almost some baseline language, because you really got to spell out, this is data that reflects the Erie County Sheriff's Department. These are responses that reflect policing in general. And I would even think in the executive summary, in the front of the document, there should be a paragraph saying, just like you did, that we did an expansive amount of data collection in the following areas, boom, boom, boom. And it should be noted that some of the data is specific to the sheriff's office, but much of the data is unspecific and is generalizable for law enforcement. So maybe, again, put it in the executive summary, and then in each of the 4 sections, we need to make sure that we really spell that out, because I think that's serious and it should be specific. That's it.
Yeah, thank you, Holly. And boy, that's a great idea to help alleviate my sleepless nights by putting it in the introduction, the executive summary, but also for all of us. And this too is kind of what I teach in research methods, and that is we're going to get information, and that information has to be put together in however you want to put it together, but it has to make sense. And whatever conclusions we make and recommendations that come from our findings all have to be grounded in the data that we have. Just because, yeah, go ahead.
That's what I think, the format that Bill developed for this whole thing, it makes absolutely logical sense in the way that he places it. He puts everything, up front. Okay, these are the issues. This is the data. This is other type of data. This is our conclusion based on the data, and these are recommendations.
Yeah, excellent. And I even like that because even how we're organizing it is lending to the credibility of our conclusions and our recommendations. We're,
Yeah.
we have attorneys on board here. We're trying to make a strong argument. That's what we're trying to build, and one that we can all turn around at the end of the day, because there are going to be some people that we make happy, and there are going to be some people that we're not going to make happy. And I want us to be able to look at everybody, especially ourselves, in the mirror and say, look, this is what we did. We gave it an honest shot. We collected this information. This is what we found. And these are the things that we came up with. Right?
Yeah.
Marty,
Yes.
this is a good discussion about the style of the final report, and I want to follow up on what Holly was saying. When we put together our plan in Springville, we saw it as an opportunity to make improvements, it almost as a collaborative thing, and we realized that perhaps if we suggest something, somebody might, especially an officer, might take it as a negative criticism and might take it the wrong way. So the wording is important, but I think we should, I would think the task force, I think we're all want to make improvements. And so the recommendations are made in that, with that purpose, not as something to tear down the Erie County Sheriff's Office, but something to possibly would improve it. The other thing was, the implementation of our recommendations I don't think is in our purview. So we could make a recommendation for the Erie County Sheriff's Office to do something, and they could try to do it. They could work on it, and they could say, well, it's not feasible or whatever, or it could take years to implement, or So I think there's we really don't have to worry too much about that. If what the data shows and our finding shows says, well, this is a recommendation, then it's up to them to limit them. For example, a real simple one is training. More training. Well, maybe they don't have the money. Maybe they don't have the man hours to do that. But maybe that's a big impediment to implementing that suggestion. That would be a simple one.
Yeah. So I was just thinking about that as an example too, and I can tell you that both citizens and the deputies want more training. One said, "As much as you can get me, whenever you can allow me to." Great responses from people that are trying to improve their position and what they do in life. So they all want it, and I agree with you. The recommendation then should be that we do that, but it's going to cost money. And, our recommendations are specifically going to the Erie County legislator, and that body's going to have to, it's not like the Erie County Sheriff's Office hasn't been asking for years for added money for training. And they typically get said, well, that's great. We all want that. And you don't get any money. You don't get any extra money. So if this is the natural result of our data collection and the input that we received, that this is what people want, and that turns out to be an example recommendation, then it's going to be put onto their shoulders in the legislative body to say no. And hopefully this is going to be a good impetus to get the training that people want and the officers feel they should have.
Marty, if I could just put face on that real quick. We are not,
Sure.
We would actually, we are looking at this as an opportunity to improve what we do. And I think a great point has just been made there, that, in your recommendations, from the sheriff's office perspective, we would certainly request that your recommendations be made in such a way, and let's use the training as a perfect example, that there should be more training in the Erie County Sheriff's Office, and it should be appropriately funded so that we can do that, because that is just an absolute perfect example, because we would love nothing more than to train our folks much more than we already do, but it's not an economic reality Because to do that, we have to pay people overtime to do the training, and we have to pay, we have to pay for services for people to come in and do specific trainings, and that really limits what we're able to do. So, I would ask that, that the committee can consider not only, a recommendation in using this as an example of more training, but the second part of that recommendation should be that the county needs to appropriately fund, whatever recommendations you make.
Mhm.
There's all kinds of things we would do differently, were we to have the funding, to do them. So, thank you.
Sure. Thank you.
I have a quick question. In looking at the draft plan from Niagara County, I don't know if there is a section there that is called goals and measures, in by the police reform, and he actually details out different goals that their sheriff department has committed themselves to do based on the recommendations of the board. Do we know how did they ended up doing all of this all in one shot?
I don't know that.
Yeah, because they actually have
yeah.
very specific goals and recommendations of what the sheriff department is planning to do going forward, and they even have timelines when they're expected to accomplish it, and so on and so forth. And I'm wondering if they were able to do that by getting some sort of commitment from the legislature to fund, those objectives.
Gotcha. I don't know the answer though.
Okay.
Maybe Andrew can work on that for us.
It's Dan. I think I can answer it for you. The sheriff's offices in the other counties were part and parcel of the group that was looking at reform, and they were like, we're providing you the data. You guys are doing everything, and I think that probably that's why the difference. And where they have measurable outcomes, and the sheriff's office going, yep, that's because they were part and parcel of the decision process and recommendations to the legislature. Do you understand?
Got it. Understand.
And circling back a little bit, my whole intent of this and everything I've committed my professional career to is applied research that helps agencies perform better. I think we all want that. So, yeah, that's my whole world. How do we use this stuff to make lasting change and improve the office and make people feel better about their sheriff's office? And that's, that's never-ending work, and it needs constant organizational attention and improvement. And I hope that part of what our final recommendation is, that this becomes part of the culture of the sheriff's office to be able to internally examine how they're doing on some of these things, some of these indicators, how they're engaging the community, how diverse they're becoming, things like that, and have a systematic way of going back at regular intervals and seeing how they're doing. It should be that simple.
And I think, we were looking at next steps for the Eden plan, and we have to obviously hold a public comment on the draft, and we're going through that process now. But we also are committing in what we have to submit to the state that we've reviewed and done the following steps, and I'm assuming the county executive will have to do the same. But we have to do a resolution or a local law associated to that, and in that resolution, I'm hoping to commit to similar things after reviewing the recommendations from our police department, not necessarily maybe with a time frame and as specific as Niagara County, but I would hope that the Erie County legislature would look at that, and in their resolution or determination of a local law, if that's the direction they're going, will also commit to something as a follow-up or review process of the recommendations from this committee. I'm assuming that's where they'll go with that. And I agree with Dan. They probably, similar to how Eden did it, had the stakeholders right in the committee. So we actually can do that also right away. As long as we don't get any more or any public comment at this point that would change anything. But real quick, I just wanted to say something as a follow-up to what we were discussing right before that. A follow-up question. I'm subcommittee 4, which is a lot of training. It's a subcommittee about a lot of that. And I don't feel like our subcommittee has as much data to go off of based off of the surveys that we've completed already. I'm very interested in getting the deputy sheriffs surveys that you're just getting now. That I think will help subcommittee 4 quite a bit. So as soon as we have access to those, that would be very helpful in putting our recommendations and draft together. I just wanted to mention that.
Now that I know that making you guys editor to the citizen survey worked, I will do the same for the deputy sheriff survey, and you should all have access to their responses tonight as well.
And that's on the Google Forms, because I didn't see that.
It is, but you know what? I will. The only I have no problems putting that into SPSS and sharing it that way, because it was easier to just send you a Microsoft Word document. It's easier for you, but I don't know if I'll, maybe because the answers are shorter, I can get all the open-ended responses in without it being obnoxious and having me send you a 200-page document. But in general, one of the things I can tell you is that not only did everybody say they wanted more training, the citizens said it and the officers said it, but I believe once we look at it, I mean, I only had about 30 seconds to look at the deputy sheriffs, but I think they even agreed on the topics that they need. They want issues on implicit bias. They want training on CIT or mental health responses. They want EMS responses, training. And by the way, one of the interesting things that they said, when we asked, do you think EMS calls and non-criminal calls are important to policing? So many of them, and they've done this in other departments as well, point out how important it is that they're very often the very first person on scene. It's so important because they're the first. And one citizen even commented, I think she must have worked at a hospital, but it was like, I want them to even forget the other EMS calls. And if there's somebody in cardiac arrest or somebody, who's it's a life and death thing, those are the calls we need to get people to as quickly as possible and use as much technology to identify how to get them there as quickly as possible. So everybody agrees on a bunch of stuff is my point. And I think that stuff is going to make it easier to make the recommendations, and that we should make it so that the legislature is encouraged to follow up. And that's the reason why the county executive put this deadline on us, so that it does have enough time to go through the legislature and get serious attention to. So, that's part of why we have to hurry. Okay. And I'll just also comment that we have our resident statistician, Mel, on board. And so I'm just going to assume that she's going to second everything that I said about using data to make our findings and our recommendations. But
I couldn't agree more.
And we'll have her make sure that she checks on anything I put out to make sure that I do it right and we can interpret it properly. So I will do that. And yeah, Mel, I don't think you heard me earlier, but I converted the citizen survey and sent it out as a Word document. But one of the things, by eventually getting it into SPSS, we can start doing some chi-squares and some other things to see if there's differences on how people responded to questions based on demographic variables. And I think so we'll be able to go deeper than what Google Forms gives us in these pie charts. So that will be interesting, I think. Anyways, so anybody else have any more comments or anything that they looked at as far as any of the data that they feel like sharing, so that the other subcommittees can think about it as they chew on all this stuff?
Set up
Okay.
meetings for subcommittees.
Yep. So could we just come to some kind of completion on, or understanding on the subcommittees? So can we have the subcommittees broke out with the same leaders as before, and everybody meet and communicate and do everything they can, and let's try to shoot for next Wednesday to have a draft set of organized bullets, or however you want to put it together. If you want to write it, bless your souls. But at least you're enough stuff that incorporates all of the materials that we have, and gets things ready for next Wednesday. Does that sound make sense?
When you say next Wednesday, that means bringing the final draft from the subcommittees to the full task force.
I think by next Wednesday, yeah, we should shoot at
Okay.
each subcommittee sending me their section and Andrew their section of either it written up or in an organized structure. Maybe our English teacher would have us put it in sentence outline format, but however you do it, I'm okay with. And then the question is, when should we meet again? Um, you know, if it's due on Wednesday, do I turn it around and get everybody's stuff back to you by Wednesday night or Thursday, and then we all meet next Friday to go over what we reviewed?
But will that give Margaret enough time to have it ready for submission to the county exec by the 22nd?
Yeah, so let's see. I'm trying to chew gum and walk at the same time here.
The
So
19th is a Monday. Friday is a Monday, and the 22nd. I mean, correction. The 19th is a Friday.
yeah,
The 22nd is a Monday. All she has is a weekend to do this.
yeah. We need to make it a little sooner.
Marty,
Yes, sir.
I think earlier we were talking about the subcommittees meeting later this week. So
Yes.
that would
Yes.
mean tomorrow or Thursday. And if we could set up Zoom meetings for the subcommittees, the subcommittees should meet this week, and then the result of that should be pretty close to a final draft of the subcommittee's report. That could go out by email as soon as it's done.
Mhm.
So, like, you know, it could go out on Thursday or Friday to all the members, and then on the 17th, all the members will have had a chance to look at the subcommittee reports. And so on the 17th, that could be the meeting that could be the final meeting where all the committee members have their final shot at what the subcommittees are recommending. And then that goes to to you and Margaret, who are putting the final draft together.
I agree.
I think that's a great plan. Although that last sentence, you got me very confused. I thought for sure I had hornswoggled you into being part of the me and Margaret draft committee party. But anyways, so how do we feel about Bill's proposal? We meet over the next 2 to 3 days as subcommittees, get everything put together, and then by next, as soon as you're done, but should we say by like Monday that you get things back, and
Well,
then we share it with everybody for a Wednesday meeting.
yeah, Monday is President's Day, so we don't have a meeting then. But I think Wednesday the 17th is a good day
Yeah,
for a
I'm
meeting,
I'm
at least for me.
suggesting. Yeah, I'm suggesting that the subcommittees have their work done by Monday,
Yeah,
so ready to share.
that I think that's reasonable because our next meeting, let's say on the 17th, we need some time to read all of this, all the reports from the subcommittees. I'm thinking there's going to be overlap in conclusions and recommendations and things like that, and that can be sort of ironed out or at least discussed, and then whatever the consensus is at that time of the committee, well then it goes to the final draft for the report, because you have to have time. You can't, I don't think you can throw something like this together in a day or two and then just say it's done, because you got to let it cook. You got to draft it and let it sit and go back and look at it again, and you just can't. You can't be that. It can't be done that quickly, as Esau said.
My father's split pea soup took a weekend to become perfect. So, time sometimes is needed. Anyway, I absolutely. Does anybody disagree with that? Don't
I'm
anybody
good.
disagree with my father's split pea soup? But anyways, so why don't we do that? We'll all, every subcommittee chair reach out to everybody tonight or tomorrow, get things moving. You have until um, Monday to have everything written up and shared with Andrew and I. We will get that to Margaret. And is there anybody else that's interested in helping with the writing?
I can't write. That's why I have Kelly.
Well, you
I,
can.
I can help, but it's very difficult to committee write something, and it's probably I've never tried it over Zoom, so
I think one of the ways that we can do it is if you jump back into the world of Google Docs. Um, I've grown more accustomed to grading papers like that, but where it first came into my life was my college daughter saying, "Hey, Professor Dad, could you proofread this before I turn it in on Monday?" And it's real easy to make comments. It's everything is happens live. So if you make an edit, the other people who are working on it see that edit immediately. So even if you're not Zooming, you could Zoom and use the Google Docs, and I'll have do it that way. But
yeah.
I just think
Okay.
it facilitates multiple people working on a draft, so you don't have to keep emailing it back and forth.
Okay. One question is Andrew going to have a set up Zoom meetings for the subcommittees?
I don't know if Drew is still here. Monica is, and I'm going to volunteer both of you. Yes, please.
Sure. Yeah, we could host
All right.
meetings. Yeah.
Excellent.
Andrew
So
just replied to mine and said that he could set up WebEx with very little notice.
excellent. We're all going to pitch in any way we can to get this done and to do it well. So we have a game plan. More comments?
Yeah.
Yes.
Can I just ask? I see some members of the subcommittee too here. So, what time is good to you? Wednesday or Thursday, 5 o'clock? Esau?
Doesn't matter to me. Whichever anytime that you choose, I'll be there.
Brittany?
Wednesday probably going to be a little better for me. But I'll try
What day?
either way.
Oh,
Wednesday
Melody?
would be better. Yes.
Okay.
But either day would be fine.
I can make most anything on Wednesday work.
At 5 o'clock, is that the time, or you have
I
another?
do have a meeting at 6, but I can make 5 o'clock.
Okay.
Hey, regarding subcommittee 3, I'm looking at Thursday at 5:30, and I got Margaret's not on, but Olivia and Melody, and of course Miles isn't here either. But Olivia and Melody, 5:30 on Thursday. Does that work?
Works for me.
We got one yes.
Okay, I'll follow up with an email to the committee members. Just tentatively scheduled
Okay.
5:30 on Thursday. I'm looking at
And
That's
who's
Thursday, right?
this Thursday
Yes.
coming up, 2 days. Yep.
Works
And
for me.
then for subcommittee 4, I sent out an email already. I know Brittany has responded. Thank you. Wednesday and Thursday mornings work best for me, which may work for those that are on multiple committees. So you saw if that works Wednesday or Thursday better. I know Brittany said either one would work. And Olivia, I'm not sure your schedule, but tomorrow morning or Thursday morning, if we could get together, just reply to the email and we'll get that scheduled.
It's tomorrow morning, as long as it's done before. I have a dental appointment at around 11:30 tomorrow.
Okay. So like maybe, I mean, is Brittany, is that good with you tomorrow? Do you want to do like 9:30?
I can make that work.
9:30 would work with me too.
Okay, great. Thanks, Olivia.
That's good. I'm good with that.
I'll let Andrew know to set up the WebEx then. Thank you.
By the way, I'm just sitting back loving on all of this. Everybody's working together and pulling hard to make this work. I really appreciate it. That's awesome.
I just have one question. So on the meeting for the 17th, is that going to be at 5 o'clock for the whole group?
Good question. Is that Wednesday?
Yep, Wednesday, the 17th.
Yeah, I would think so.
Okay.
Monica, could we do that at 5, the same kind of time
Yep.
on the 17th? Great.
Yeah, I think that sounds good. I'll check with Drew, but then let you know.
Okay. And I think I'm the maybe I'll win the biggest loser award today, because I believe I'm chair of the subcommittee 1. Who else is on subcommittee 1? I'm not even sure off the top of my head. That's why I'm going to win this award tonight. Anyways, if you're out there, hello. I'll make my schedule open and free to each and every one of you. You do know there is a list someplace, so if you're on that list, I will hunt you down, even if I have to use Holly and her security expertise to do that.
Marty, you won't
Yes.
have to look too far. I'm on subcommittee 1, so whenever you want to convene the group, I will make myself available.
Beautiful. We'll work on it tomorrow and the next day. Well, I'll get in touch.
And I hate to roll you under the bus, Joe, but I think you're on it too, correct?
He's muted. Come on, unmute yourself, Joe, and volunteer. Step up and volunteer. It's going to be tomorrow and the next day.
Oh, okay.
We know where he works.
Find the list. All right.
Yeah, he's going to help out. So excellent. So I think we have a plan, everyone. Other than that, is there any last things for the good of the order? All right. So we will set up a series of subcommittee meetings. We'll have a meeting next Wednesday, the 17th at 5 p.m. as long as Drew says that's good, but I think he will. And we have a plan, and go enjoy dinner.
Thank you. Have a good evening, everyone.
So long, everyone. Bye now.
Thank you,
you, Marty.
Marty. Yep.
Thanks, Marty.
Thanks, Marty. Take care, guys.
Bye-bye.
Queen's Wave. Now, if Joe doesn't sign off, we'll know he's someplace else. See you guys.